Hi, everybody. We are the ModPo people, and here we are. Well, you're the ModPo people too, but we're some of the ModPo people, and we're here to talk about week 5. I just want to give out the number, say hello to my friends. I want to warn the TAs about a poem I'd like to start with. It's a poem they might have to look up the text to get ready. I want to make a couple of announcements and then welcome a ModPoer named Fifi, who just has been joining us, but just posted for the first time today. And then we'll get started. So 610-616-3028, 610-616-3028. And
Al, it's 3208.
Is it 3208 or 3, Chris?
3208.
Oh,
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, Anna's really fast. 610-616-3208. Sometimes Zach puts that number up. Maybe this would be the right time to put it up on the screen. Give us a call at 610-616-3208. Chris will answer the phone, or Skype if you prefer, if you're international or whatever. Skype to ModPo Pen, ModPoPenn. Max is going to be watching comments that are going into the Facebook group. Max, would you just put a post there so people can see?
Sure.
To come to it, okay. Allie is going to check the Twitter feed, and all you have to do to get our attention there, to get Allie's attention, is to use the hashtag ModPoLive, ModPoLive, all one word, obviously. Gabe is going to be looking at the YouTube comment feed, which these days is where people do their commenting. And I think Dave is going to be doing the ModPo site thread, which is all you have to do, it's been pinned, so all you have to do is go to the discussion forums and you'll find it, okay? Before I do my announcements, I just want to let the TAs know that when we finish the announcements and the hellos to Fifi, I'm going to play Erica Hunt's The Voice of No, which is in the ModPo Plus, really great poem, and we'll just talk about it. I don't think we've ever actually spent that much time talking about it. I think it would be a great way to start today. Some announcements. First of all, tonight at 6 p.m., Gabe Ojeda Segay, our Gabriel, he's going to be reading at 6 p.m. I have sent out that link a few times. If you're not sure how to find it, just email us at modpo at UPenn, modpo@writing.upenn.edu, and we will, what a cover indeed. I'm really looking forward to this, Gabe. We're going to do 35 minutes of reading, 25 minutes of Q&A. We need a lot of ModPo people there to fill up the YouTube comments. We're going to take some questions. And if we don't get questions, I'm going to ask some questions because I've been reading the poems, including some of the new poems in the new book called Madness, as well as Losing Miami. So Gabe, it's Gabe Day here, by the way. We have 3 Gabe sessions today. The first was a poem talk about Kevin Killian. It was really great. You won't see that for a few months. Then, of course, the webcast and then the reading. And my second announcement is that the same thing will happen with Jake Marmer next week. There's the new Jake book. Look at that. Cosmic Diaspora. Jake has the titles. He's got the titles. Cosmic Diaspora. There's Jake. You have plenty of time to get the book. It's out now, right? Station Hill Press. Jake, is it out? It is. Okay. So Jake's going to be doing stuff with us next week. A poem talk about a poem by the late Steve Dalachinsky, and then we're going to do reading as well. So exciting. Okay. I want to welcome Fifi. Fifi, well, I'm just going to read what Fifi said. So bear with me. It's a little long, but it's really, really fun. So this is our hello to Fifi. I think Fifi said that she was going to tune in today. So hello, Fifi. You're generally in New York, but you're in Northern Virginia right at the moment. So we welcome you. Here's Fifi. Fifi writes, I'm a classical pianist, piano teacher, and doctoral student of piano performance in New York City. I discovered ModPo back in April while browsing free online courses, hoping to learn about some interesting subjects to help cope with isolation and uncertainty. It turned out to be truly one of the best things that's ever happened to me, working through the main syllabus by engaging with one poem and one video each day Love that, right? Such a slow postseason thing to do. You can even do it in the main season if you just really stick to it, 1 or 1.5 poems a day. And Fifi says it became such an important ritual back then in April. Remember those days? That not only provided structure to my days, but also opened up my mind to face the world in a more critical and somehow less fearful way. It's funny, poetry used to be an intimidating thing for me, and I avoided getting into it out of insecurity. Now I found myself craving it. The interpretive parallels between poetry reading and music performance are also very palpable, and I honestly believe I've become a better musician because of ModPo. I'm now more open. I'm now more experimental in my ways of thinking about sounds and how to make meaning out of them, and also how to play those sounds on the piano to communicate something more powerful to listeners. And beyond music, this course has inspired me to question everything I have ever been taught, every rigid rule, every aesthetic convention, anything that is ever claimed to be objective, unequivocal, or closed has suddenly sprung open for me and demanded itself to be analyzed. I started ModPo Plus. Unfortunately, I had to put it on hold when school started up, too many doctoral seminars, but capital B-U-T. I've been trying to keep up with the webcasts, found myself compelled to write my first forum post, which would be this one I'm reading. This post is basically a love letter to Al and the TAs. I'm obsessed with all of you. You're also smart. You have beautiful spirits, especially all caps, given the political nightmare we are currently living in, with a culture of discourse that feeds into chaos and violence. It is absolutely astonishing to hear such thoughtful, compassionate, and life-affirming conversations generated by a couple of words on a page. I am just in awe and at times moved to tears listening to these discussions. Thank you all so much. That's Fifi. Welcome, Fifi. We're so glad that you're here. Oh my gosh. Hi, Jake. Hi, Jess. Hi, Anna and Sylvie. Oh, Sylvie. Oh, Sylvie. Amber Rose, hello there. You're in your office with one little lonely coffee, 2 coffee cups on the shelf in the back, a couple of books. Kamara, hello there. Allie, hello. Dave Poplar, Max, Erica. Chris, doing the phone. We've even got somebody on the phone. And Gabe and Zach, who's hiding. All right, this is fun. All right, so I want to pick up who's on the phone, but then I'm going to ask that person to do the voice of no with us. So who is on the phone? Chris Martin.
Hey, Al, we have Shoshana calling from New York City, so early phone call today, yeah.
Hello, Shoshana. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well. How is the singing going?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Not much singing in person to do at the moment, but, you know, definitely can work on it individually and on in Zoom and stuff like that.
That's good. I want to plug your podcast, which I listen to.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Will you say the name of it?
Sure. I have a podcast called Scene to Song. It's a musical theater podcast because I write musical theater and I'm in that field, but it was actually inspired by ModPo, just the way of bringing poetry to the community as we do, as you guys do. I also aim to bring musical theater to these kind of really great intellectual discussions on musical theater to the wider community. So
Very
Scene to
good.
Song. Thank you so much.
It's on. I found it on. Yes, Chris, the phone sounds great. I found it on the app I use, so it's pretty much everywhere. So, all right, Shoshana, I'm going to preempt with apologies whatever you wanted to talk about because I want to play. Are you okay with doing this? I want to play Erica Hunt's marvelous poem, "The Voice of No," and have us all talk. Not all of us, but some of us talk about it. So, would somebody in the Zoom put the link to the text in the chat so that you can all follow it? Maybe that's already happened. Great. Here's Erica Hunt Oh, Lily isn't here to remind me to ballyhoo Erica Hunt, but I will do it. So Erica Hunt will be one of the Writers House Fellows, Kelly Writers House Fellow, in the spring of 2021. We are extremely excited, and Amber Rose may be mad at me for revealing this, but Amber Rose is working on, as part of Amber Rose's dissertation, some Erica Hunt work. And I'm really very excited about the ideas that Amber Rose Johnson is bringing to Erica Hunt. So, oh yeah, yeah. So that's Veronica, A Suite in X Parts, which is a absolutely devastatingly fabulous book. So this is Erica Hunt. Thank you, Amber Rose. Okay, so here she is reading, reciting, performing The Voice of No. I think I'd like to ask, let's see, Jess, Erica, and Kamara. Well, Amber Rose is writing about this person. So let's have Jess, Amber Rose, Kamara, and Erica and Shoshana talk about the poem. It's going to have to be brief, each of you, but here it goes.
The voice of no. I have that voice. No need to be contrary. I put on a face. No use for muscle. The workers stand online for hours. No need to read. 24 hours of the shopping channel. No fire. We have the illusion of doing what we want. Is that any way to talk with your tongue pressed against glass? The TV set is barking this Sunday morning, off when we acquire an instant memory and round language where the ends justify the ends. We rummage among the many unplugged connections looking for that darn fraction of a % of the landscape you say it is possible to live in. Who will miss it when we divide up the sun, devour the young rather than give up our good seats? The postcards are bought out. The LP is skipping. And anyway, rescue is sure to be slow. In place of a raft, we paddle ladders past the litter of drifting bodies.
Wow, that's quite a poem. So, Shoshana, would somebody, Gabe, would you post to the YouTube chat the link to the text so that Shoshana can see it? Okay, this is tough because we've never talked about this poem, I don't think. But Jess, do you want to start just making one observation about what you heard?
Sure, I can make one observation. It was great to hear this poem aloud because I was struck by the line that begins, "The TV set is barking this Sunday morning." And then there was a pause and the word off came in a slightly different register, as if it was doing something, right. Turning the TV off, signifying something. So that struck me because the poem begins with this kind of, with these expressions of, apathy or futility almost, but then the voice was accomplishing something in that line.
Very nice. You got to the heart of one of the things that Erica Hunt does so well, which is to mess with commonplace idioms to help create the sense of dysfunction and of openness at the same time. And there's a lot of dysfunction in this poem. Okay, Amber Rose Johnson, I'm sure you have 50 thoughts about this poem, but give us one of them, please.
I was also really struck by hearing this poem. I think Erica Hunt in general just uses her voice in such profound ways. And the kind of irony of the poem really comes through when you hear her perform it, because she takes on the voice of, maybe I might say it sounds like a newscaster or a TV reporter or like a like Wheel of Fortune oriented individual, which adds a whole other kind of valence to how we read this poem. Whereas on the page, I might just read it as maybe an individual speaking. But then when I hear the poem, it then sounds like not quite a voice of authority, but a kind of voice of the social network that penetrates through to the individual. And I think it's really interesting how just voice can sort of change the orientation of how we read that poem.
Oh, that's really, really, really great. Oh, there's so much to say. I'm just going to restrain myself. But voice of no, voice is a word we use as up to the point of cliche in the world of poetry, but we also hear no as resistance, or no as protest, or no as refusal, or no as parental. There's just so many things it can be. I want to turn to Erica, then Shoshana, and then Kamara. Erica, what are your thoughts?
I agree with what others are saying about how great it was to hear Hunt reading the poem. And for me, what that did was really bring forward how each of the three stanzas is operating on a very different register, which hearing it read, I really got the sense that the poem begins in a sort of, begins in a way that to me feels at least a bit more expansive. So the voice is kind of outside. And then as the poem moves on, it slows down and almost contracts as the lines get smaller.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's great. Shoshana, how are you feeling about this poem? You called to talk about something else, and now we're talking about Erica Hunt.
No, that's totally fine. I love being thrown a poem to respond to. But yeah, I'm kind of focusing on the first stanza right now, and just looking at the word no, like as it goes down the first word in each line, like no, like that. And I'm also focusing on the line, we have the illusion of doing what we want. And I like what you said about all the meanings of no, and like how that line, we have the illusion of doing what we want, might relate to all those different meanings of no. I mean, I'm personally thinking of it like, oh, I've said yes to too many things, and now I should have said no, and and that whole illusion of like, yes, I wanted to do all that stuff, but now that I have said yes to it, like, did I really want all that? And did I really want, having so much on my plate, that kind of, but there's so many ways to think about no, and how that line might resonate with each one, I guess. That's
great, Shoshana. I really like that. Can I ask you, and again, apologies because you called to talk about something else. Can I ask you to say goodbye, hang up, and listen to the rest of the conversation through the net so that others can call?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Shoshana. Be well. Hope everybody listens to your podcast.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Oh, thank you. Same.
Kamara, I know you had something else you wanted to say, so say it anyway and ignore my stupid question. But it's not a stupid question, but ignore my question. I used to read this poem as partly a maternal thing, and no means no is something a mother would say to people who are not behaving well, but also no means no in the gendered political sense. But now I'm thinking about 2020, and I'm thinking about racist violence. And I've never been able to, I used to think it's a poem about Katrina, but it actually predates Katrina. And what happened to the Black community in New Orleans. I don't know what to do with it, but are there any social and political elements of it that you can draw out if you like?
Yeah, when I was reading it myself, I got a sort of maternal, I was reading it sort of maternally, especially that question, is there any way to talk with your tongue pressed against glass? I got grand maternal from that, for me personally, but then again, echoing the gratitude for the, hearing her read it out loud, because from that I also got newscaster, I also got entertainer, I got more irony than when I read it the first time, when I read it really sincerely. Of course, glass is surprising from like what I expected, the roof of the mouth or something like that. Right. So yeah, I think that she's sort of opening up that space for all of those different interpretations, right? Yeah.
Thank you all. So the number is 610-616-3208. Chris, do we have someone on the phone at the moment? Okay, good. Gabe, I'm going to ask Gabe and then Allie and then Max and then Dave to report anything that's going on. If there's nothing significant happening in your venue, that's fine. You can pass. Gabe first, what's happening there?
Yeah, lots of just reactions, mostly to the poem we were just talking about, Erica Hunt's great poem. Also, Shoshana wanted to highlight the Muriel Rukeyser poem that we have in ModPo Plus this week. Other than that, nothing too pressing right now, but a lot of hellos and some good talk.
Great. Don't forget to plug your reading in there. You know, all those people are likely to come to the reading. Max, what's happening sorry, Max is doing the Facebook group. Anything happening there?
Just some hellos from Sanjeev and wave from Mary Thompson Hardwick from South Carolina.
Oh, both of them are longtime ModPo people, and Sanjeev is basically, he's a pillar. He holds the thing up. Certainly the Facebook group.
Absolutely, he does.
10,000 plus people. we met Sanjeev in Boston last year. Okay, so Dave, anything happening in the thread?
Yep, there's 3 questions. So the first one is from Terry Talty, a mentor, who says, Al, I think you've seen that Mufta and I have been discussing the form of some of these poems this week and how they may or may not be effective as social commentary or activism. Wouldn't we all like to learn from this week? How can one make poetry that would change the current political American landscape? How are the forms here in ModPo effective? Sometimes the traditional misses. Ev McLaughlin also writes, hi there. I was wondering if any of the participants in the original videos had changed any of their opinions since then. Anna, in particular, had some very strong opinions on the form and the poems of the Harlem Renaissance section. But the question is for everybody. And finally, John Sanchez asks, does Boy Breaking Glass, a personal favorite of mine, end on a note of hope? And how does it fit in with the rest of the poem? The final Steinian list is disorienting and to me seems to combine words with a variety of tones and connotations. How do we put them together? So that's what
I love that. I love everything that you've reported from there.
All
Allie,
good stuff.
add a few things from Twitter and then we'll just sort of semi-democratically decide which issues we want to bring up.
Christy Williamson says, can't go out, treat yourself to ModPo Live. And then we have Steph Abulist, I hope I'm pronouncing that handle correctly, saying, so agree with Fifi. Thanks for sharing these conversations and modeling how thinking together can work.
Okay, so I want you guys to use the chat, which obviously our ModPo people out there around the world can't see, but that's okay, we'll report from it. Use the chat to suggest, here are the options for the next move. We can take up Terry Talty's question about whether these forms in poems that stake out anti-racist positions certainly in chapter 4, whether the forms of these poems can lead us to a politics, to a radical or progressive politics. Can they help us get out of the situation? So that's one option. The second option would be for us to revisit original views of this week's poems, particularly in the light of 2020. I would think that we would be maybe rethinking McKay's strategy, which is basically, if the police are standing by during a racist riot, a riot that's directed at Black citizens by whites who are not prevented by the police, can a sonnet argue for counterviolence in response? That's a highly charged topic at the moment in the way that it should have been, but maybe wasn't back in 2020, 2012. And then there was the question about, is it John Sanchez? John asked about Boy Breaking Glass, whether it ends hopefully. Those are the 3 options. So let's take some votes. Meantime, I'll repeat the phone, 610-616-3208. Gabe is voting for how we've changed our view, and nobody else is voting yet, so that's good. Kamara says, yes, let's do that. I mean, Terry Talty's question is really hard, but I bet we'll get to it. Okay, so there's Boy Breaking Glass. I don't know what to decide. Gabe, it's Gabe Day. Ooh, yeah, Erica likes form and politics. Why don't we try to do, it's Gabe Day. Let's ask Gabe. No, you don't want, you pick the first one and then we'll decide on the second. Which one should we do first?
Let's go with the form and politics question. I mean, I think it's pretty essential, and I think it leads to all the other questions anyways.
It does. So let's first just put into the record, just anybody and everybody, just put into the record a poem that helps us deal with Terry's question. A poem this week, either in the main syllabus or in ModPo Plus. I'm going to ask Max, Jake, and Allie to put into the record which poem would be a good place to start for that. So Max, which one? Max, can you hear us? Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry. How about we do If We Must Die?
Okay, so that's a sonnet arguing for counterviolence. Jake?
I was thinking incident.
Incident?
And
Okay.
the form ballad-ish,
Yep,
nursery
ballad,
rhyme-esque. Yeah.
Right, yep. And who else? I was going to ask Allie for that too.
I was thinking another sonnet, Yet Do I Marvel.
Yet Do I Marvel. You know, I don't think we've ever talked about Yet Do I Marvel. Let's do that. All right, so the question is, Terry's question is, in this case, with Yet Do I Marvel, somebody put the link in. Gabe, would you put the link to the text if you can find it into the YouTube thing? And maybe Allie can be dexterous enough to do it in the Twitter feed, and Dave in the thread as well. We're talking about Yet Do I Marvel. It's in, is it in ModPo main? I think it might be. It's in both, I think, yeah. So the question is, is there a politics of form? So let's go back to Allie, who raised the issue of that. I'm having you multitask, I'm sorry. So Allie, start us off. How can a sonnet be political in that poem?
For me, I think it really comes down to the way that I read this poem is kind of as a long preamble to the final two lines, where we don't actually know where he's going. Let me just quickly bring up the text for myself. We don't know where County Cullen is going until we kind of get to the real question, which is, yet do I marvel at this curious thing to make a poet black and bid him sing. And it's very hard to read that and not consider the form that he is working within here. And so to me, that reads as a very self-conscious question about the form in which he is singing within his identity. So that's just a kind of starting place.
It's a great way to start. I'm going to ask someone who wants to speak to this question just to wave frantically enough so that I see you, or indicate in our chat. The question is, what does Cullen's speaker, or Cullen, think about the predicament? Is this a productive thing to be made a poet? To be a Black poet, to be made a poet? Presumably in the scheme here, it's God. Like, my being a poet is not something I have that much control over. So I'm bid to sing. I have to do poetry. And boy, oh boy, is that a problem. My question is, what do you think the speaker's attitude toward that predicament is? Somebody wave or indicate you want to. Gabe, would you try that? And then Amber Rose?
I mean, I think I want to clarify the use of the word bid here. Like, bid can be, to bid someone to do something can be basically somewhere between to offer them the opportunity to like demanding that they do it. And I think that the word you were using of like to must have to do something is not exactly what it's like, but it's almost like saying, the end is saying, oh, it's such a marvel that one can be Black and be asked to sing or impelled or compelled to sing. And so I think it's less of like a having to do something, but actually there's almost like such a pleasure in those lines before the final lines, like Ali was talking about. That's almost like the singing itself, in the sense that it's so in its clauses. It's kind of a really hard sentence to follow if you like really look in it. So many allusions, so much knowledge there. And so that's almost like this just riffing and riffing and riffing. And then at the end, it's like, it's amazing that I was offered to sing, you know?
Wow. I usually read this poem more negatively. Negatively is the wrong word, as more of an expression of concern and hurt and difficulty. I really like your reading. Amber Rose, do you want to add something to this?
I really like Gabe's reading as well, and it gives me kind of a different way of looking at this poem, which I'm really grateful for. So thanks for that, Gabe. In reading this again, I'm thinking about the form, and the sonnet is kind of like a quintessential, very classic poetic form. And while it is almost always about tension between two things, I think of sonnets as a lot of times about love, or about challenges within love. And if I'm thinking about this, the question that's posed at the end, I think it is maybe a question about an expression of love. But I'm flipping back and forth between the Zoom and the text. I'm also zooming in on the word curious, and curious in the context of all of the other challenges that he's naming. So he's doing this kind of performance of, I know this mythological history, I know kind of these I have this classical knowledge, I can perform that classical knowledge. But in my present, in my lived reality, there's this other challenge that I don't have the answer for, that all of my classical traditional knowledge can't help me explain this thing that isn't impossible, right? Because I just exemplified that I'm doing it, but is curious and strange and has this tension that I can't quite rectify.
Oh boy, that was great. I want to turn to Jake because it looks like Jake wants to say something, but Ambrose, you just did better than anybody I've ever heard deal with the fact that Cullen has done what he's saying is so agonizingly difficult in the poem itself. He feels he's got this double role and it's gonna defeat him, but it doesn't, because he pulls off a perfect sonnet. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I add a thought?
Yeah.
I think there's also maybe an argument that's being raised about what poetry is supposed to do and what poetry is supposed to talk about. So poetry is reserved to the classics and to these myths and to these kind of dominant white stories in history, or mythography. Is there room to talk about a Black life in a classic poem? And he's almost saying there's not room in the instance when he's enacting a refusal and saying, but I'm making the room, which is what is so amazing about this.
Oh, you did it again. I mean, I badly summarized your position, then you went back and did a brilliant job of it. Oh, I'm so glad. No doubt we will make a clip of this conversation about this poem and add it to ModPo Plus, because it's very productive so far. Jake, a quick comment, and I just want to throw out the number again, 610-616-3208, and ask Chris to let us know if someone calls. Jake, a quick thought on this?
Yeah, I not as much of a comment as I was just enjoying what Ambrose was saying, but I also find the word curious like a very curious word here. It's a very positive word, and the way that it comes after like awful brain and awful hand. Oh, but it's a curious thing, and this transition of I guess the awful divine brain, the awful system, and the awful hand that executes action of it, and dwelling on all of this and being inside of it, and then just reaching this final couplet, saying like, isn't that a curious thing? Like everything is so awful, but to be in the space of music, poetic music, of working with these ideas, isn't that a curious thing? Like, look, it's working. And maybe there's something to it. It's you know, it's a positive word, and maybe you know, back to the question of hope that somebody posited on one of the forums, like maybe it's a hopeful word. Yeah, like I would be curious, you know, if we keep going with this poem, if people read the final two lines as kind of like positive, curiously positive, or not.
Let's, before we switch to maybe Ev McLaughlin's challenge to us, which is to look back on our earlier readings of any of the poems this week to see if our positions have changed, or our stances have changed, or our attitudes have changed. So just throwing that out there as I do, to put it in your mind, because we'll make a smooth transition to it. I really want to confess that I have always read this poem as an "I'm angry at God for putting me in this situation" poem. And what you all are doing, speaking of changing one's mind, what you all are doing is saying that Cullen isn't waiting for the day when he can write a poem that will do this work, but that he may have done it here. And that is really significant. So I'm going to throw out, before we switch to this question of Ev's, I'm going to throw out Terry Talty's real challenge to us, which is, at a time of bitter divisiveness and hatred and injustice, can the old question of, you know, can a poem do something? Can a form of a poem do something? We ask a lot of our poems, but really what happens is we talk about a poem in such a way that it energizes us to make things better, particularly through a communality and a collaboration. And that spirit of collaboration is pointing the way forward to, I don't want to say a better world, but a world in which conversation is possible. What Fifi was saying, that she's gotten so much out of this course. The poems themselves, though, can point that way. And I just want to open it up to anybody who dares to try to deal with that. And I'm kind of thinking of Jess and Erica on that topic. Erica, you are a progressive person, a radical person, if I may say, but you live in the world of poetry, and you're also an educator. And you teach, some of your programs are teaching in prisons. Can you see these choices such as Cullen makes, as progressive or revelatory, or a way of pointing the way towards something better? Good luck.
Yeah, that's a very hard question. And I guess my response, and I hope this isn't a cop-out, but I've been reading a lot of the poet June Jordan recently. And Jordan has a moment in an essay where she writes, poetry means taking control of the language of your life. And that to me feels like a crucial sentence as far as what we're talking about. And that sentence to me is revelatory. And I also think that it speaks to the importance of what we see Cullen doing, in that through the poem, he is creating space within both the form and the language for, for him to exist.
Oh, that's really well put. Thank you. June Jordan was a Writers House Fellow years ago, and we have a nice recording of us really talking with her about this very issue. She was very ill at the time, but she was a marvel, and it makes me think that we should have a June Jordan poem in ModPo Plus, because she's really very, her project at the time we had her as a Writers House Fellow was poetry of the people, the people's poetry, which is really the spirit of Writers House and of ModPo. Jess, do you have a brief additional comment on Terry Talty's impossible question? Then I want to turn to the question Ev posed, and I'm going to ask Dave Poplar and Max McKenna to respond to it, maybe Allie too. Jess?
Yeah, I love impossible questions. They're my favorite kind. I think that this question for me, yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to it, because it's one that I can I have an answer that I can believe in intellectually, but I find it hard to articulate. And in thinking about the poems for this week, I think form, to me, it comes across as a kind of excess, some kind of extra thing that's happening in the language. And there are some poems where you might not notice it as such, and then there are other poems where you notice that excess and it forces you to confront it as purposeful. And that might be vague, but I just think that procedure of being forced to confront that excess and figure out what it means is like a really important thing that can lead to other things.
Right, great. Thank you. That was really great and not too big. We're going to take a phone call, and we're going to defer for the moment the question of revisiting the poems and reinterpreting them. This phone caller has been with ModPo so long that he might want to play the game. So let's bring up John Knight from the Washington, D.C. area, famous John Knight. John, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I just called because I'm watching you guys, and it's just, you've just evolved in some wonderful, beautiful community. You're really giving an example to the world about how to use Zoom and how to use language, to use poetry as a way to talk about things, you know, to get people to get people to a species perspective rather than an individual or national or family perspective. You're just doing a wonderful job. I didn't want to call you, but you just got better and better, and I just had to do it.
Thank you, John. Can you stay on the phone for just a little bit?
Sure.
Well, I just want to say how moved I am just hearing your voice. I remember how urgent your friendly, interventions were way back when we first started ModPo, particularly because you brought the Quaker process, your interest in the Quaker process, to ModPo. And, you know, Penn is very lightly a Quaker school, but at the time my kids were both attending a Quaker school in the area here. And I was just thinking about the Quakerism that's sort of behind, and also pacifism that's behind it. So I didn't really say much there other than, you know, it's great that you're with us here. The question I'm going to pose, John, to Dave, Poplar, and Max and Allie is a question that you might be interested in. And so would you stay on the phone for just a little bit and respond to what they say?
Yes, I'll try, but you know, I haven't been hearing you for the last 15 minutes because I've been talking to Christopher.
Oh, that's
But
nice.
I'll try.
Okay, well, really the question is going to be to Max, Dave, and Allie. And I would ask Anna this question too, if Anna can hear and wants to participate, please join us. So back in the June of 2012, 8 of us made a bunch of videos. We all took our positions. We were all young. I was even young. And how has it changed? I'd love for the 3 of you, and maybe Anna too, just to say, use an instance from week 5 to say how your views have changed over the 9 years that we've been doing this and talking about these poems. What a weird question. And I'd love for John Knight to comment on the responses if he would be willing. Okay, Max McKenna, you first.
This is a great question, Al. I think when we first did this week together, I held on to the idea that a certain amount of formal familiarity or clarity would be essential to the politics of these poems insofar as that it would help circulate the political message. That I thought this sort of a kind of recognizable form would help in that, the way that like a broadside or a slogan painted on the side of a wall would accomplish something similar.
So for instance, Max, McKay's sonnet, arguing the very radical position for counterviolence, you felt could get out there because it was a sonnet and be appreciated by a lot of people who would dismiss a free verse rant.
Exactly. In part because at the time, publishers might have been more receptive to a sonnet, for example,
I mean, to say the
regardless of the content. So maybe, you know, they'd be able to get that message across. I think, though, in the last 10 years, I'm not so sure of that idea anymore. In part because I'm very interested in the gulf that exists between raising awareness and actually changing or structurally affecting society. So I'm not sure that raising awareness in this kind of discursive way is as effective as perhaps I thought it was 10 years ago. I think that it serves a purpose, but I'm not sure that formal familiarity or clarity is going to do what I thought it would do. That there's maybe something, there's more to be said about, or there's something to be said about demanding perhaps a bit of more of an open form from poems that would want to be political in this contemporary moment.
So well said, Max. I'm going to turn to Dave Poplar in a second. I just want to add, folks.
Let's see.
I'm not sure what's happening there. Max, we added, we put Amiri Baraka's poem Incident in week 6 so that we could reflect on how we dealt with Cullen's incident in week 5. And Baraka, I think, does a brilliant job of using an open forum to challenge, for instance, the racist/anti-racist binarism of the Cullen poem, which is very powerful. But Baraka is saying, in effect, with all due respect to the Cullen poem, it's really complicated, and it's so complicated that I'm going to mix up the pronouns so that you really have to work to figure out where the violence is coming from, who gives the violence, who receives the violence. So that's a good example of how we are led by Cullen to think one way. Anyway, thank you. That was great. Dave Poplar, has there been a change in 9-10 years?
It has been 10 years, because when I took English 88, I printed out all these poems. And if you can see, this is printed from 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So, I still have my printouts.
You kept your notes.
Yeah, I'm a sentimentalist. So,
you know that.
Yeah, I don't feel as if I ever formed any real hard and fast attitudes. I feel like my understanding has continually deepened, but I haven't made any 180s or had any dramatic epiphanies, but it has been just incredibly deeper levels of understanding of each poem, of what form does, of how form is being used. So I can't really answer the question. It's like I haven't had any.
But you reflect, and that's what we asked for. Allie Castleman, how has your view changed in 9 or 10 years?
I like just using the example of Dave's 10-year-old piece of paper, what I imagine that to be, because maybe that exists as it was, like as a maintained document, but you can also imagine like some of us having that document that we've written on every single year in like every single discussion we've had about the poem. And then you have like a literal palimpsest of different like views and different voices coming in. And so I think like on one level, it's hard for me to remember what I thought. It's always kind of hard to go back, which almost brings to mind the Charles Bernstein poem in week 9, I think.
Week 8, yeah, week 8.
8. But the just have it, I think, you know, the conversation that we had just now on Yet Do I Marvel is a really good example of just kind of like spontaneously someone will say something that shifts the way many people have been thinking about a poem, and then you never let go of that kind of pivot or just new like shade coloring the poem in your mind. So yeah, I think it's kind of impossible to separate all of the layers and all of the kind of deepening that kind of Dave was talking about, just by being influenced by many people over 10 years in community.
John Knight, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. John,
my thought of my change. Go
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I just recently reread Wilbur's poem about the death of a toad.
Yeah.
That we think of as being, that you all thought of as being humorous, and it to me, and I just reread it and thought about it. It's a very pure example of sublimation.
Mm-hmm.
He had the PTSD, and the death of the toad that he killed with a motor machine reminded him of the death of a friend of his in combat.
Mm.
And so it's just the powerful use of this poetry is just amazing.
Yeah. John Knight, when you started this call, you were very enthusiastic and praised us. And I just want to extend that praise to be relevant to the discussion we've just been having. And then after that, I just want to invite, and then I'll ask you to hang up, and so someone else can call. I'm going to ask Amber Rose, or Amber Rose and I'm going to invite us together to talk about why, briefly, we made the video about incident, particularly because when we first made the video in 2012, we thought it made sense to read the N-word in the rhyme, and we remade that video, and I think we made a much better conversation. That's a great example of how we have changed, how ModPo has changed in the last 9 or 10 years. And Amber Rose was, leading the way in that discussion, which was pretty profound and really a reflective moment, I think, for all of us. What I wanted to say to John Knight is one of the reasons I'm so feeling emotional about your calling is that you were the first one to say, damn it, this is a community. Do you realize what's happening here? Because, MOOCs were newfangled. And you were there. You came to the Writers' House and you challenged us. You said, do more than just talk about poems. Yeah, John?
Yeah.
And I really value
you are a community. You are a community. We're talking about climate change. You're talking about racism. You're doing it, man.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks for calling. Chris got busted for talking your ear off, so you didn't follow what we were saying, but that's all right. Chris, he has his role. Thank you, John. Love you so much. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye now.
All right, bye-bye.
Keep going.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I really like that guy. 610-616-3208. We remade a bunch of videos since 2012. But this week, what's most relevant is that we remade Incident. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I think we needed to. Probably everybody in this group felt that way, that we needed to. There wasn't a dissenter at all. And I do think we did a better job. But Amber Rose she taught the graduate version of English 88. I don't know what the number was, 589 or something. I think you taught that day. And one of our favorite students, Sophia DeRose, keeps referring to it as a turning point in her understanding of poetry. So I invite you to say a word or two about why this kind of change is necessary, not specifically about the N-word if you don't want to, but just about how poems change depending on the changing contemporary situation. They're not still, they change, yes?
They're not still, they change. And also poems are in the world. And talking about poems happens within the context of the world. And talking about a poem in the present, whether it's in a classroom, in a Zoom discussion, on a forum, whatever, there's not like a special tent that you're suddenly under when you want to talk about a poem. So all of the context, all of our subjectivities and identities and all the ways that we are in relation to each other and to power structures, all of those things are still in play when we're reading a poem, when we're talking about a poem, when we're teaching a poem. And I think sometimes in classrooms in particular, we were talking about this in a classroom context, there's maybe an assumption that because it's a teaching context, maybe we're exempted from certain harms that we might produce when using language. But that violence is still embedded in that language, no matter when or how you're discussing it. And I felt like in the ModPo video, there wasn't there was an assumption that maybe there was an exemption because we were in the teaching context.
Right.
And so we needed to think collectively, more critically about not just what we were participating in, but what we were exemplifying, thinking about the fact that we're modeling conversations that we hope are happening around the world.
Yes.
And we have different relationships to that language, and our identities, our subjectivities are always present with us, and we are always accountable to how we relate to language.
Yes. Yes, that's just so well said and very powerful. I have a kind of riffing I want to do in response to that, but I'm going to ask Max, Kamara, Jake, and Anna briefly each to comment on what I'm about to say about teaching and community. So hang on. I mean, Anna, if you're able to focus, I'd really love to hear you on this. I can't keep my eyes off of Sylvia, who looks either like she's about to fall asleep or is about to jump out of your arms. So back in 2012, this thing called a massive open online course started to happen using the robust platforms that were being created at that time, edX, Coursera, and some others. We joined Coursera because we've always been skeptical about MOOCs, most people were, because basically you filmed some videos, usually they were talking head lectures, and then you left it alone, and people wandered around the discussion forums 2 or 3 years later and found no one who was present, no one who was contemporary. And we decided, because the Kelly Writers House is a platform that goes on, it's organic, it changes, it's alive, it's real. We decided to behave as if it were a Writers House project and continue doing what we are doing, with many of the people here in this Zoom having said year after year, yeah, I've got other things to do. I've got a job, but I really want to come back. I want to keep this thing going. Remarkable, right? And so what we've done is exactly this thing that Amber Rose is talking about that pertains to poems, pertains to those of us who do the work of gathering around the poems. We can't continue to have the same conversations every year about the poems as if we haven't changed and as if the poems aren't moving in a kind of William James pragmatist philosophy, theoretical sense. They are moving down the stream as we move down the stream, probably at different rates of speed. And we have to accommodate ourselves and juxtapose ourselves constantly to that. And if we don't change, then we might as well have just filmed ModPo and let it be static. It's taken a lot of energy to do it, but it is, which is why one of the reasons why I'm so excited about, I'm talking about Amber Rose now because she just spoke and we're talking all the time, but this is true for so many of you. I can't wait for you guys to be in a position, if you choose to be a teacher, to just sort of have your own platform, as it were, to do this in a new way, and to learn from this thing that John Knight has been enthusiastic about, which is that you can't just do the aesthetic. You have to do the social, contemporary, cultural, and political work to make sure that the aesthetic keeps up with it. And that's not saying anything bad about Shakespeare. It's not saying anything bad about the sonnet. It's not saying anything bad about a poem that we used to respect, but are worried about respecting now because it's not speaking to us. It's okay. It's not PC. It's not PC. That's ridiculous. Okay, so I'm inviting Max, Kamara, Jake, and Anna briefly to respond in any way at all to this question that Amber Rose raised and that I attached to this whole question of experimental forms of teaching. So Anna, do you want to take a crack at it?
Sure. I think that the experiment of ModPo doesn't begin and end with the fact that we have these videos, right? It's the fact that we come back every September, October, November and have these webcasts where we're, doing the same poems in our 2013, 2014, 2015, 2020 bodies and brains. And I think the fact that ModPo gets to be this like living, breathing thing makes room for all of the new people who want to hop in and enjoy these poems with us and want to raise questions and important issues and invite us to reconsider some of the things that we may have said in the past. I mean, my 2020 brain and body look back on my 2012 reactions to the McKay, and I like cringe, because I think I just got so caught up and excited about the does the form of the poem enhance or detract question, that I missed the point of the poem entirely. And the real answer is that it's so much more complicated than the binarism as the form enhance or detract. We can't look at the Harlem Renaissance poems for sort of content only or form only. They are doing exciting and interesting and politically and socially really, really difficult and challenging work. And that McKay poem is totally astonishing and important, and a revelatory use of the sonnet, and a politically important use of the sonnet. And I think over the 9 years or so of reading it and rereading it, I find it to be just as exciting and revelatory now as I did then, but just in a total sorry, in a totally different way. And I love the fact that I get to revisit it every year and expand and deepen my thinking on it once a fall.
Thank you. It sounds like actually in the off season we'll remake the McKay video. Why not? You know. Okay, I want to get brief comments from Jake, Kamara, and Max on anything relating to this topic, and you can add teaching in it if you want. Jake, first.
Sure. Well, on the question of experimental forms of teaching, I was reminded what great poet David Anton said, that ancient is the avant-garde, and I think this very ancient practice of coming together around a text that is made sacred by the coming together of people, and by investing the energies and the deep conversation into this text. I think this ritual, this very ancient ritual that is enacted, I think here in a ModPo space is a very poignant ritual. And when I taught in a classroom setting a version of this and used these videos, it felt like just so precious to share this ritual with high school students and initiate them into this, and certainly coming back to the same texts over and over in a kind of like a cycle, as Anna was pointing out, like that itself is too part of that ritual.
Thank you, Jake. I'm going to turn to Kamara next, but I just want to acknowledge that 4 years ago, exactly today, a number of us, Anna, Chris, Zach, and I, were in your classroom making that video about Gertrude Stein with your students 4 years ago, exactly today. Kamara, your thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I think that I have two main thoughts. One is that I think that something that's different about ModPo and like a regular classroom where you typically meet in person, and maybe the teacher has taught the syllabus over and over and over again, but the students are always typically coming to a new text, and they don't usually get to see the students before who got to read the same text. And I think that that sort of archive building is really unique, and it allows for I think it allows for ModPo to change in really intentional ways and to grow in really intentional ways, which I think is really important. And I just wish in some of my other classes that I had recordings of previous students talking about some of those texts, just as examples, but also to as fodder for discussion and questions. And then I would just like to say thank you to Amber Rose for her comments about incident. I don't know, they like moved me. And I think I was thinking back to my times in English ADA and not having like words and articulations for some of the things I was feeling about the video or the conversation. So I think back to that moment and I feel really grateful for what you just said. So
yeah,
thanks.
Yes, amen to everything you just said. You know, Kamara, when you were in that class one day after the session about these poets, you came up to me and said, where are the rest of the Black poets in the course?
I remember that,
And
Al.
I don't
Yeah.
think you said it in a, I mean, it was a very, we were Writers House citizens together. You said it in a non-accusatory way. You said it in a productive way. You obviously had enough of a connection to the teacher to be able to say, I'm a little confused by this.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, I remember sitting on the green couch with you and talking about that. And I remember thinking a lot about what I was going to say and ask. And I remember being a little frustrated about the isolation of Black poets in the Harlem Renaissance, right? And I think that has really changed since I took English 88, right? And then you encouraged me to read more Bob Kaufman.
Hey, oh my God, Kaufman came out of that.
Yeah, and I was really
You know,
grateful.
like we're doing now, Kamara, right this moment, what you're praising ModPo doing, but the Writers House community is a series of years of people moving through and moving out. And yes, I regret and I'm saddened that you thought for a second that you had to rehearse what you were going to say to me. You as
I do that anyway.
well, but still, and then, you know, like when I saw you in Boston a year ago, exactly a year ago, actually, we just, I don't know, we went out after the webcast and we just had some beers and I felt like whatever hesitation had been there was gone. And we were talking as peers and friends. And, you know, so I accepted that challenge. And this is, the course is better because a student said, hey, wait a minute, let's rethink this. It's the whole question of canon. So thank you. Thank you so much. Max, real brief, a comment on this whole issue, and I'll just put the number out there. Chris, do we have someone on the phone? Okay, so I'm gonna put the number out there and I'm gonna ask Max, Ali, Gabe, and Dave to tell us what's happening in the forums, and then we'll do a bunch of final words. The time will fly, I assure you. 610-616-3208 is the number, and Skype is ModPo Pen. Max, your thought on this big question?
I love that this has become a very retrospective webcast full of reflection. And I wonder if it's because 8 years is the kind of right amount of time, or maybe 2 presidential elections is sort of the right amount of time to want to like look back on all of this.
First one was great. The second one, in 2016, our webcast that next day, go back and watch it. I mean,
I remember.
I'm sorry we're taking positions, political positions. We were really sad. It was like an elegy. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Max.
No, I definitely remember that one. Where was I going to go with
remember Gabe that day. Like Gabe said, we should cancel. No, we shouldn't. We got to do this, right? Gabe, you remember that? Oh,
I remember really not wanting to do it, and then I remember that we did it.
Too.
But I remember you saying at the end of it that you were glad we did because we really just commiserated.
I think
yeah. Anyway, Max, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think what we've managed, or what we can really see here now, 8 years into this, and we've been able to observe it in different ways in previous years. But I think maybe the reason we're all being so reflective right now is because we're sort of at this watershed moment, maybe for the course, maybe for our political reality, that we can kind of look back and really understand a kind of long game behind this pedagogy that's really compelling, I think. And it's not something that a lot of traditional learners get to do. Lots of college students do, they kind of take a variety of classes and maybe they move on, they get a career. This is more like something that an academic would do. And so it's a really interesting experiment, I think, for lots of people. And I would challenge people to think back on other parts of their lives 8 years ago and try to track the change, or just appreciate that sort of length of time in between.
Well said. Okay, Gabe has been following the YouTube comment feed. I want Gabe to throw a few things out. Allie's been following Twitter. Max has been following the Facebook group, and Dave has been following the discussion thread. I'd like each of you to toss out a few things, and then we'll decide which one more topic we'll take up. And we're not, Chris, I'm sorry, we're not going to take any more calls because we're going to do it that way. So call and talk to Chris, but we won't put you on the air. No, I'm kidding. And then I'm going to particularly ask Erica and Jess to start us out on whatever the topic is, because I want them to have a chance to talk some more. So Gabe, what's happening in the YouTube comment feed?
Actually, a lot of reflecting that we're doing too, and reflecting on our reflecting, and people are really talking about how their relationships to the poems have changed. Some shout outs to Kamara and Jake's comments in particular. Also, I just want to include that my cat is moving over me at this moment. I also want to include that Allison Fraser shouted out Anna's multitasking and Sylvie's perhaps desire to speak into our void. But not too many specific topics or questions right now. I mean, there's still the issue of Rookheiser, which got actually a lot of sort of fan supporters. So I think people like that poem.
Is that the one about the
Ballad of Orange and Grape?
Yeah. Oh, we have a poem talk about that. Yeah.
It used to be a favorite of 88 of the class version. I remember when we taught it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I've written about Rookheiser in my new book that's coming out, which I will ballyhoo some other time. But yay! But I have some doubts about Rookheiser's politics. I don't have any doubts about her politics substantively. The politics of the poems, I'm still getting my head around. But we don't have time to talk about that poem now. But I'm glad that it got mentioned. Okay, thanks, Gabe. Allie, what's happening in Twitter?
A while ago, Sanjeev linked to a Natasha Trethewey incident poem, which people should check out. A lot of just praise and appreciation for Ambrose's commentary on Yet Do I Marvel and on holding ourselves accountable to language. Some appreciation too for Jake's commentary on quote, this reading and rereading via coming together around a poem, a ritual, or reacted every year. Paraphrased, so beautifully said, Jake. So a lot of just appreciation and kind of echoing what we're talking about.
Okay, that's great. Max, Facebook?
No questions, but a few great comments. We have Dan Melton, who's active in the Madison, Wisconsin group, who says, yes, I agree with what Al is saying. Yes, the poems live, the poems are alive, the poems are out in the world. The poems are not static. ModPo is alive, the stream is moving.
Yeah.
And we had an insightful comment from Kathy McCabe D about the rhythm of Yet Do I Marvel, comparing it to the opening lines of Paradise Lost. And so we had a little discussion there about singing.
Great. Kathy D, yeah, and Dan. Boy, those are some great members of the community. And so finally we turn to the ModPo thread. Dave, what do we have there?
Some good reminiscences, really. Ev McLaughlin says, I can't believe how much time has passed since earlier ModPo. My son was a baby at my first ModPo, and now he's 10. And Anthony Watkins says, and I've gone from being not old to old. And Martin Porter says, I was born old, but I'm getting younger.
Those are some stars. Martin Porter, I mean, we know Anthony Watkins is such a mainstay, and we love him and appreciate him. I mean, he's so honest and often self-critical, which he shouldn't be. But Martin Porter is just constantly impressing me in the forums. Really enjoy. He came to my office hour early today. All right, so that's great. We found out that there's a lot of people talking, but we don't have any questions. So I'm going to actually ask, before we do final words going around, I'm going to ask Erica and Jess to say whatever they want. Not a final thought, but a follow-up on anything that's been said today. Erica, I'm always, 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 to the point probably of being bothersome, always interested in your project and how ModPo could possibly continue to support it, because you're very busy, but you say yes every year you join us as a ModPo TA. And I guess I'm giving you a chance to reflect on that and some of the stuff that's been going on in your world that speaks to what we're going through here.
Yeah, thank you for that, Al. It's interesting. I remember my first time in ModPo as a student was shortly after I left my home of New York City, where I'd lived my whole life, to move up to the Hudson Valley, where I've been since then, and it's now 7 years. And participating in ModPo as a student was just a fantastic experience. And I continue to feel as though this community enriches both my own work as a poet, but also the work that I do in my regular job. And this semester in particular, I've been using a ton of the ModPo resources to supplement the things that we're teaching. And I would welcome anybody. I have office hours tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. And we've been having some conversations that are about teaching, but I'm really experimenting with a range of different ways to use all of the different things in ModPo with my students, either asynchronously or in real time. So I've been using videos, I've been stealing poems, etc. So I would welcome anybody that wants to head over there and chat with me tomorrow night.
That's great. Erica, would you shout out to one video, ModPo video, that has worked well in your teaching lately?
Yeah, the two that I've done most recently is the video of, it's a ModPo Minute video with Al and Ray Armentrout talking about the poem Speech Acts. And then this morning I used, I had assigned the 33-minute version of Divya Victor, Al, and Lainey Brown talking about W is for Walt Whitman. And both were really transformative for my students, who are very diverse groups spread around the world. So just, you know, offering the living poet talking is something that's been central to how vibrant our work has been, despite Zoom.
I saw a really wonderful snarky post by Divya herself, I think it was in Twitter, saying, I wish Walt Whitman were around to take ModPo. He could learn a few things. Oh, I love that. Jess, your thoughts on any of this? And then we're going to do final words.
My thoughts on any of this?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been fascinating for me to listen to these reflections as a relative newcomer to the ModPo world. And I mean, I'm sort of full of like gushing thoughts about it, which I won't, I don't have time to share them all, but I think, you know, I've learned so much from participating in this course. And I think there's a kind of like, somebody has probably used this phrase, it's somewhere in my memory from last year, there's a kind of radical kindness and attentiveness that prevails in this community that like is very restorative to me and in the work that I do in a more traditional, you know, whatever institutional setting. And I mean, aside from that, I'm bummed that we didn't get to talk about the Brooks. And I was, you know, I've been thinking about that poem, and I've been thinking about the Hunt poem as well, and this idea of, you know, this search for the darn fraction of the landscape you say it is possible to live in. And, you know, like for me, this is why I, you know, keep coming back to poetry in my work and in my life, because it is that it's such a vital part of that search for the habitable space, or the habitable world, right? Which is what we're all kind of figuring out here.
I'm really glad that
I'm grateful to ModPo for being a part of that for me.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, Boy Breaking Glass is, you know, I think I've said many times, I think my favorite poem in the course, but we actually talked about it the last 3 years at length, and we've made some nice video clips from it. I think, remember, Kamara was with us in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We talked about it last year. And I'm glad we talked about The Voice of No. I have two phrases I've written during this webcast. One is ancient ritual, and the other is radical kindness. So I'm happy to have both of those. Okay, so we're going to do final thoughts now. Anything at all. It could be just a ballyhoo, like, you know, I'm reading tonight at 6 p.m. Tune in. Or it could be Don't forget about this poem, or it could be come to my office hours, but it could also be continuing the reflections. So let's start with Gabe, and then we'll go around. Gabe, final thought?
I'm reading tonight at 6 p.m. It's
I'm
on
so
YouTube.
excited.
It's on YouTube. Through
I'm
probably.
so excited. I have really loved this book.
Thank you.
And I'm tempted to make you read a poem from it, as I did during Poem Talk, but I won't.
Okay.
But I hope people will come to watch it. Yeah.
So I'm reading from that, and then I'm going to read from a book that's coming out, they tell me, early 2022, which is like years away, but maybe the world will be like more bearable then. I don't know. So anyways, every time I've ever had a book coming out, I say to myself, oh, I don't know if the world will still exist then, and then it has. So I don't know. I'm going by that logic again. My final word, I'm going to make it really short, was just like one of the things that has changed for me. I'm moving my computer because of the cat. One of the things that's changed for me in my reading of the Harlem Renaissance poets is just the historical knowledge that I've gotten about how much lively debate there was between these figures. I mean, some of it was like fighting, some of it was good old artists fighting, but there was a lot of debate about what it meant to make the kind of art that they wanted to make, what it meant to be a movement, what it meant to hold a politics in public. And I actually just really like when people are very disagreed about that. And I think some of the figures that kind of fall out of our canons of the Harlem Renaissance, like the great Richard Bruce Nugent, really elucidate like how lively this movement was. Sometimes when the movement arrives to us, we just see it frozen in time, but it's important to remember how much life there was there. So that's all for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gabe. Allie Castleman and then Dave Poplar.
I'm just kind of thinking about the language of final words, and how, like in our final words webcast, particularly there, final words doesn't feel like an appropriate encapsulation of what we're doing. But even here in a webcast like this, when we've talked a lot, when we've talked in a very meta way about the course, we're so much better for the continuation and the evolution of what this is. And so I'm just kind of trying to, like, in my head, think about what feels, it never feels like final words. So that's just something I'm thinking about.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Dave?
One of my favorite poems never made it into the main syllabus here for ModPo, but it's in ModPo Plus, which is, of course, Cottage Street, 1953 by Richard Wilbur. And there is an amazing discussion that, Al, that you had with Tracy Morris about this poem that I could not recommend more strongly. It's amazing. Tracy is amazing about this poem. So I strongly recommend everybody going to ModPo Plus and checking out the discussion. It's a ModPo minute for 16 minutes, but it's a ModPo minute and it's great.
Thank you. That was a revelation. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Dave. So let's go to Erica and then Max.
I want to use my final word to shout out the Sean Bonney work that's in ModPo Plus. And he's a writer who I think really relates to the conversation around form and politics.
Oh, yeah.
So I would definitely suggest that folks check him out.
Fantastic. And Anna will remember, I guess it was 3 years ago when we were in London. 3. And Anna was ready. We had 3 people lined up to do the poem talk on Sean Bonney, and 2 of them got sick, and Anna filled in, and she was brilliant. And anyway, I highly recommend all that. That's great. All right. Thank you, Erica. I think Max is next, and then Allie.
I'll just use my final words to plug my
did
office.
Did Allie already go? I'm so sorry. Yeah, the Zoom has confused me. Go ahead.
I'm just going to use my final words to plug my office hour, which is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central. Stop on by.
Fantastic. Kamara, then Amber Rose.
I would just like to note that it is Amiri Baraka's birthday today. And so, yes, it is October 7th. So if you're feeling extra, celebratory, want to remember this day, go to ModPo Plus and check out Amiri's stuff.
And the main syllabus, both.
And the main syllabus, yeah, and the main syllabus.
Great. All right, thank you, Kamara. And Amber Rose, followed by Jess.
Yes, my final word is going to be me reading just 5 lines from this Erica Hunt collection that I'm reading right now. This particular poem, this collection issues a lot of challenges, but this particular poem is just such a, I'm just gonna read the last couple lines.
Please.
Touch, reader, we were meant to touch, to exchange definitions and feed the pulse of language. I promise, if you step in it, it will propel you, me, it, topple distinctions, ease doubt and belief, and all that in between.
Erica Hunt, that is great. Thank you. Jess, followed by Jake.
I definitely can't follow those lines, so I'm just going to say that I'm having an office hour this Friday at, when is it? 11 a.m. I have it written on my wall, so I won't forget. This Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, stop through. It was a little lonely last week.
Oh, well, I'll come and join you then, if that's the way it has to be.
Thanks, Al.
I do hope people will join office hours. That's what we're here for. Jake?
Well, since we're talking office hours and 11, mine is tonight at 11 p.m. So for late nighters and West Coast people and beyond, a good time to pop in, whether you want to continue the good old ModPo nostalgia train that we've done some writing on here, or you want to talk more. I want to quickly shout out a poet who appears with a very early and formal poem on ModPo Plus syllabus, and that's Adrian Rich, who I've been reading a lot past 2 years and just enjoying and getting more and more interested in this poem, in this poet whose writing is definitely its own kind of challenge to modernism, perhaps.
It is, yes. Thank you, Jake. And Anna and Sylvie?
I would just like to say that I think the best thing about reading these poems and this week for me is it always brings home for me just how vital art and art making are to having conversations that enrich our understanding of other humans and other human experiences. I think it's art and poetry that are sort of uniquely positioned to help us do that and help us access that. And this week is always kind of what just brings it home for me again and again.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you all. I'm going to do my final word. I'm going to turn my final word over to Ann Spencer, who was a major influence on the Harlem Renaissance. She was older than most of them, most of the poets in the movement. She set up a garden at her house. I think it was in Virginia, and everybody went there. Langston Hughes knew that he needed to go see Ann Spencer, and she was just an amazing force and pretty much forgotten. And we have a poem in ModPo Plus called Earth, I Thank You, and I'm going to read it twice by way of concluding. And after I'm done, we're off the air. We hope that you will read each other's essays this week, talk about communality. This is the way ModPo works. We talk about each other's work, and that's really good. I'll note that John Knight sent a text to Chris, his buddy, to say, tell Al he has achieved, and the word is, sorry, I'm not Christian, so I don't know this word. It's a Greek Christian word, Koinoia, koinoia. I'm probably mispronouncing it. And of course it means communion. So, and he means it in the social sense, not the theological sense. Or maybe he needs it in the theological sense, in which case I don't understand it. But here's Ann Spencer read twice, and thank you all, and have a great week, and read some Baraka, and we will see you soon. Ann Spencer, Earth, I thank you. Earth, I thank you for the pleasure of your language. You've had a hard time. bringing it to me from the ground, to grunt through the noun, to all the way, feeling, seeing, smelling, touching, awareness. I am here. One more time. Earth, I thank you. Earth, I thank you for the pleasure of your language. You've had a hard time bringing it to me from the ground, to grunt through the noun, to all the way, feeling, seeing, smelling, touching, awareness. I am here. Thank you all. Love you all. Have a great time. See you soon. Bye.